ask what's on your mind. So open up my eyes. Tell me I'm alive. Open up my eyes. Tell me I'm alive.
It's not simple to say that most days I don't recognize me, that these shoes and this apron, that place and its patrons have taken more than I gave them. It's not easy to know I'm not anything that I used to be, although it's true I was never attention's sweet center. I still remember that girl. She's imperfect, but she tries. She is good, but she lies. She is hard on herself. She is broken, but won't ask for help. She is messy, but she's kind. She is lonely most of the time. She is all of this mixed up and baked in a beautiful pie. She is gone, but she used to be mine. It's not what I asked for. Sometimes life just slips in through a back door and carves out a person and makes you believe it's all true. And now I've got you. You're not what I asked for. If I'm honest, I know I give it all back for a chance to start over and rewrite an ending or two. For the girl that I knew who'd be reckless just enough, who'd get hurt, but who learns how to toughen up when she's bruised and gets used by a man who can't love. And then she'll get stuck and be scared of the life that's inside her, growing each day till finally reminds her to fight just a little to bring back the fire in her eyes that's been gone, but she used to be mine. Used to be
Good morning. Welcome to Watershed. We're so glad that you are here, that you are choosing to spend your Sunday morning with us, whether that's here in person, maybe you are joining us online on Facebook or YouTube. Glad that you're here as well. Want to give you a little bit of space to say hi to people in the comments section in both of those places. Maybe you're joining us outside, enjoying some of the weather. But if you're here in person, outside, we want to invite you to stand as we begin this morning by singing together.
God was never angry. God was not against me. God was never far away. God's not disappointed. God's not keeping score, and God's not judging my mistakes. God is light. God is love. Do not fear, for God's with us. God is good. God is grace. God will never hide her face. 'Cause God is. God is. God was never angry. God was not against me. God was never far away. God's not disappointed. God's not keeping score, and God's not judging my mistakes. God is light. God is love. Do not fear, for God's with us. God is good. God is grace. God will never hide her face. 'Cause God is. God is. God is. God is. God is light. God is love. Do not fear, for God's with us. God is good. God is grace. God will never hide her face. God is light. God is love. Do not fear, for God's with us. God is good. God is grace. God will never hide her face. I see so clearly now. God is in the mystery. God is always with me. I was lost, now I'm found. Everything I once thought, blinded by the love. I see so clearly now. God is in the mystery. God is always with me. I was lost, now I'm found. Everything I once thought, blinded by the love. God is. God is. God is. God is. God was never angry. God was not against me. God was never far away.
Thank you for singing with us this morning. And we start with this idea in mind that God has never been far away. And doesn't always feel like that. Doesn't always, that's not always our lived experience. But one of the ways that we are reminded of it is by being in community together. that we are not alone because of all of you. And so I want to take just a minute to allow you to turn and look at the people around you. Maybe it's a smile. You can say hi, but just be reminded that you have people around you. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness, Lord. There's nothing worth more that will ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. And I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, where my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Sing it together, Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Oh, your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. We'll sing this together. There's nothing worth more. There's nothing worth more that will ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. And I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, when my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. If you're open to it, I want to invite you to close your eyes just for one minute. Maybe this week has been busy. Maybe this week has brought lots of brain space that has been chaotic or hectic. Maybe there's been pain or grief. Maybe you just haven't had a moment to slow down. Maybe you've been isolated. You felt confused. Right now, in this moment, we all have the opportunity to let those things fade away and become more aware of the presence of God, the presence of the Spirit. It's as close to us as the breaths that we take. All we have to do is slow down. So God, we pray that these next moments will be space for us to slow down, for us to commune with you and with one another. Thank you, God. Amen. You can be seated.
Good morning. Yo, yeah, good. Yeah. So good morning to our online folks. Good morning to those of you who are outside. My name is David. I am one of the pastors here on staff, and let me be possibly the first to tell you this morning, though it would not surprise me if I'm not. You all have good energy this morning. Might be the caffeine talking, but I don't think so. I think it's you. So congratulations. May that, yeah, clap for yourselves. Yeah, good. Excellent. Yeah, may you just kind of ride that wave the rest of the day. I have some really important things to tell you about. Probably, no, not the most important thing you're going to hear with us this morning, but it makes the list, like 2, 3, 4-ish. So the first of those things, we have a student event coming up. A couple weekends, July 30th, 6 to 9 p.m. Love the new TV we installed back there, because now I can see what I'm talking about. This is great. So 6 to 9 p.m. We are going to be basically doing what youth ministries have done for centuries and centuries. It's very much a, if it's not broken, don't fix it sort of thing. We're going to be hanging out, playing foosball, 9 square, free food, fellowship, food, fun, fellowship, the pillar, the F's of youth ministry. I learned from my youth ministry mentors. They learned from their youth ministry mentors. It is a storied tradition. So that's what we're going to be doing. It's totally free. Friends are welcome. Just to be super clear, youth ministry. So like, you have to be in middle school or high school. So I know I'm throwing the hard sell down right now, and all of you are like, oh, wow, yeah, I'm going to clear my schedule. No, it's not for you. It is for the like medium to slightly larger iteration of humans that might exist within your households. So if you have some, we'll take them, but you're getting it. So excellent. Second thing, which is comparable importance to the first thing, if you have those size of humans, so the middle school or high schoolers, or smaller ones, so elementary, pre-elementary, baby age, basically if you are responsible in any way for budding humans, and you at any time bring them here to Watershed for us to look after them and teach them the ways of God, then we invite you the day after the youth ministry event on the 31st, that's a Sunday, immediately following the service, to come hang out in here with Blair and I. Blair's our greenhouse pastor, and we just want to steal another storied phrase from the ministry world. We want to cast a little vision for you, all right? What I mean by that, if church isn't your thing, what I mean by that is we just kind of want to tell you what's coming up in the next kind of school year as far as like family ministry goes. It's all good things. It's really the best things. We have the best ideas, the best plans, and we want to share them with you and your small and medium-sized humans. So. This is free. It's short. Like literally, we're only going to take about 15-ish minutes of your time. Because of that, we've chosen not to feed you. So eat breakfast, and then come hang out with us. You will leave enriched. I can promise you that. Very confident. So this is like 2 weekends from now, the 30th, student event, just for students, again, to be clear. And then for all families who are responsible for kids. The next day, Sunday, come to that. All right. Got it? Good. All right. Next thing. We have had this partnership going with an amazing organization called Bethany Christian Services. They have been doing a temporary foster program is really the best way of describing it. Many of you are probably aware we have refugees showing up at the U.S. border all the time, and they often have to be separated from their families for a time being, and rather than leaving them in the detention centers that I'm sure many of you have seen on television and the internet, this organization and organizations like it allow them to spend that season, usually it's 30 to 90 days, in the care of a well-vetted and well-trained family until they can be reunited with their family members. I want to really, really double down and emphasize that reunification thing. This is an organization that reunifies these kids with their family members, their guardians, their parents. And you all have been amazing over the last number of months in providing Bethany with some of the supplies that they need. When you came in, you might have noticed the luggage that we have prominently displayed in our very narrow entryway. You all have provided that. What that does is when the kids are reunited, sometimes they're getting on an airplane, sometimes they're having to drive a little bit of distance to be reunited with their family, and anything that they've acquired, anything that they've brought with them needs to go somewhere. They need to be able to transport it. And so they are always so excited to be able to go and pick out a piece of luggage, and you all have just been killing it in a good way. It's like vernacular. You've been killing it when it comes to supplying us with that luggage. And we invite you to continue to do that. However, additionally, there are some other needs that the organization has this summer, including, especially right now, like summer-friendly, like climate-friendly, temperature-friendly pajamas. So we have made this incredibly easy for you. There's a magic QR code that you can take a picture of, or you can click a link on our app or website, and it will take you to an Amazon wish list where almost dangerously easily you can just push a button and magically the items that you clicked on will show up here at Watershed, and then we'll take them over, and everyone wins. It's so great. And so, in all seriousness, no, you all have done just an incredible job of embracing us in this effort, embracing this ministry. I literally hear from them multiple times a week about how much of a difference you all are making in this. So thank you for that. If you have any questions, again, all of it should be answerable if you follow the magic QR code, but I am available to answer questions as well. David at watershed.charlotte.com, the most important email address you can have in your contact list. All right. You all are probably thinking like, wow, what an amazing set of announcements. But I have saved, quite intentionally, the best for last. So much so is this the best one that I can't bear the weight of it on my own. I need to call in reinforcements, and so without further ado, I want to invite the one, the only, the legend. Wait for it. Derry, Kim Honeycutt to the stage. Now, Kim.
Morning. Good morning.
Morning. I need you to tell me why you're dressed like Stephen Furtick.
Oh, when I thought my mother's hatred wasn't enough for me, just got leveled. So here's the thing. First of all, you didn't have enough caffeine last week.
I didn't. They were closed.
So I've got some caffeine for the both of us because clearly I need more energy than what I have. Agreed? No. Okay. All right. So here's the thing. So the reason why I'm all decked out in camouflage, is that this is about ICU talks, and this is a mental health speaking ministry. And what we stand for is you not having to camouflage your emotional pain, your emotional needs, your mental struggles, chronic pain, anything that you're dealing with, particularly in the church. We really want to end the stigma within the church of when it comes to mental health issues. And so we are called ICU Talks because we see you. We see you where you are, we see how you are, and you're welcome exactly how and where you are. We just want you to come join us this Tuesday night, 7 o'clock. We meet the third Tuesday of every month. We have for 8 years. We give people a stage that no other church or no other ministry would give them a stage to share where they are in their walk with Jesus, where they all walk with mental health. So this coming Tuesday, the 19th, we get to have that event right here at Watershed, and so we want people to show up.
Yes. In this room. The one you're in right now. Very
7
easy.
o'clock.
Yep.
So the QR code will show you a way to get your free ticket. All are welcome. Please come be a part of this. There's 3 speakers. They are not professional speakers. They're people who have auditioned and are willing to be vulnerable and be on this stage. So we just need people in the seats. And I promise I will not be in camouflage, and you don't have to be in camouflage that night either.
You can't be, though. I mean, if you want
Can
to.
be, because we're open to everybody, because we're Watershed and ICU Talks together. Right?
Perfect. Yes.
We're good?
We're good.
All right, can we now acknowledge that I'm better at this than David? Thank you.
Yeah. I don't disagree. Well, thank you for your time. In closing, as I walk off the stage, I just want to remind you all that none of this awesomeness and this awesomeness and that awesomeness and your awesomeness, well, maybe your awesomeness, but none of the other awesomeness would be possible without the generosity of so many of you. Our goal every month is to reach a threshold of 5 new reoccurring givers. We chose that number somewhat arbitrarily, but somewhat because it allows us to really have a clear sense of what we're going to be able to fund, what we're going to be able to dream about. We have so many exciting things coming in the coming months, at the rest of the summer, in the fall, and we are just so grateful to those of you who continue to partner with us, oftentimes running out ahead of us, leading us in many ways, and making all of that possible. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all of your awesome energy this morning.
All right, well, I didn't trip getting up here, so that's a good start. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nicole Untuaco. Also, a lot of you call me Nikki, so either way is fine. I've been coming to Watershed since April of 2016. I was just looking for a progressive and welcoming community, an affirming church, which is hard to find in the South. And so it very quickly became my church home. I church shopped for a while, and I kept coming back to Watershed. And so here we are, 6-something years later. I'm shaking like a leaf, guys. This is so nerve-wracking. Anyway, thank you for the encouragement. So here, let me just sit. That'll be better. Okay. All right. So anyway, I don't think I talked to anybody at this church for about 2 years. I did not say a word. I just sat in a corner by myself. But finally, Matt approached me at some point and suggested that my now husband and I get involved in the preface group. So we did, and we met a lot of amazing people and learned a lot. And I ended up doing a couple other blocks after that. And I'm currently part of a supper club with some other amazing ladies from this church. To say my life has changed significantly since I first began coming to Watershed is a huge understatement. My husband Jeff and I met in early 2016, shortly after I relocated to Charlotte from Portland, Oregon. I was actually dating somebody else at the time, but we became very good friends. And we spent a lot of time with a common group of friends that we met through Linny Boy Run Club. A lot of couples have been formed there, so if you are single and on the prowl, I highly recommend you check it out. I think at least 3 of the couples are now married, so there's something to be said for that. To make a long story short, Jeff and I finally became a couple in January 2017. I like to joke that he finally wore me down, but the reality is that I woke up one day and I realized that I actually deserved to be with a person who would love and support me unconditionally and would treat me the way I've always deserved to be treated. So before I get into what's saving me now, I want to give a shout out to him. I couldn't ask for a more committed partner in marriage and parenting and in life. Through all of the ups and downs in life, he is the one steadfast, steady, and present person. At the end of the day, I know it will never be me against the world because I'll always have him by my side. Sorry, get a little emotional. A year after Jeff and I began dating, we got engaged and then married 10 months later in November of 2018 with about 240 of our closest friends and family. 6 months after that, we found out we were expecting our first baby, a baby boy due in January 2020. Fast forward just over 2 years, and we added a baby girl to our family on 2/22/22. So we have an almost 5-month-old now. So shortly after our son was born, the pandemic came along and shut down the entire world. And not only was I in the thick of postpartum recovering physically from an emergency C-section after 48 hours of labor, and mentally experiencing a roller coaster of emotions that ranged from pure joy to bouts of uncontrollable sobbing. I remember one time I was in the bathroom and I started crying because I felt like the baby was just growing too fast. I was just lost my mind. How is this happening so quickly, So, there's a lot of that going on. And of course, then the pandemic comes along and I didn't have my usual outlets. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm a very social person. It was tragic for me to have everything shut down. So, pretty quickly, we started to do some outdoor gatherings with close friends, which allowed me to hold on to the tiny bit of sanity I had left. The camaraderie that we had with fellow parents was definitely paramount to our survival as first-time parents. And our friends and family members with kids do continue to provide so much of that needed support. But perhaps what I didn't expect was the support that would come from people without kids. I'll be the first to admit that prior to having children of my own, I wasn't exactly anybody's go-to person for childcare. I was living my best life. I was traveling practically every other weekend, and I was having dance parties in my living room until 3 o'clock in the morning, acting like I was 20 when I was actually 36. So anyway, what I initially found when I was pregnant, I was thrilled, but I also felt very alone, and I'm sure some people can relate to this. The whole journey of becoming a parent can be very isolating at times. From the first trimester when you're trying to keep your news a secret and just praying to make it to the second trimester, to the early days of motherhood, trying to figure out breastfeeding, which is the worst part of parenting in my mind, and learning how to function on 0 sleep. So, yeah, and I won't even get into the challenges of parenting a toddler. We're in the thick of that right now, and it's something. So anyway, as everyone always says, being a parent, as rewarding as it is, it's also the hardest thing I think you'll ever do. And it definitely requires an entire darn village. But little did I know that my childless villagers would actually be the most critical to my survival. So that brings me to what's saving me now. My nearest and dearest friends and family members who do not have children of their own but love my children as their own are the people saving me now. They are the people who will offer to entertain my busybody toddler or hold my sweet baby girl, just so that this mama can get a much-needed break. As an Enneagram 2, I thrive on helping others, but I'm terrible at asking for help myself. But with these people, I don't even have to ask. They are a much-needed constant in my very chaotic life. I know when I bring the kids with me wherever we go, I won't have to go it alone. They love my kids, and my kids absolutely love them. So I have to start by mentioning my brother Michael, who's here today. Our toddler affectionately simply refers to him as Uncle, and even though our toddler has multiple uncles, we know who he's talking about when he says Uncle. He always looks for Uncle's red car to pull up outside and gets so excited to see him. Talk about the unicorn of uncles. He's only 29 and doesn't have kids of his own, but he's a better parent than most actual parents. I can't even begin to express how grateful I am that he made the move to Charlotte almost 2 years ago when Jack was only 6 months old. And since then, he's been our go-to babysitter, and he's by far our son's favorite playmate. He takes care of our kids with such ease and patience, way more patience than I have. My kids and the rest of his nieces and nephews are the luckiest kids on the earth to have an Uncle Michael, and we should all be so blessed to have an Uncle Michael. And then there's my friend Adrian. At the start of the pandemic, we were neighbors and quarantine buddies. We had many outdoor happy hours during those lonely and dark times. Having her just down the street single-handedly kept me from ending up in the loony bin. She has always been so quick to offer a hand when it comes to our kids. She's willing to chase the toddler around a brewery while I sit and enjoy a beer in peace. So she is proof that not all heroes wear capes. Ashley's another dear friend who's become family for us. We've known each other about 20 years now. We met in college at Ohio University. Life looked a lot different back then. But she made the move to Charlotte just over a year ago, and she is always suggesting kid-friendly activities for us to do, and she includes my kids in all of our plans. When I was recently running late to relieve a babysitter, she jumped in her car without hesitation and drove out to the burbs to watch my son until I could come home. She's just one of the most thoughtful and considerate people I know. As sarcastic as she actually is just a really good human being. And so I'm really grateful to have her in my kids' life and in my life, of course. And last but not least, I want to mention my wonderful friend Amy. I can actually thank COVID for how much our friendship has grown. We've known each other for about 6 years. She has worked at Kraft for many years. If any of you have been to Kraft, I love that place. So I've known her for a long time, and she also owns her own baking business, Sugar Queen. Check it out. But we started hanging out when the pandemic started, and she very quickly became one of my best friends, and our friendship just continues to blossom. Amy is someone who has always wanted to be a mother herself, and maybe one day she will be, but for now, she loves on my babies as if they are their own. She actually asks to take them off my hands. She's like, "Can I hold your baby?" I'm like, "Yes, please, thank you." So while there's certainly a lot of other people in our support system, these are people who are truly saving me right now. They show up constantly for both my kids and me. And what I've learned is there's truly nothing sweeter in the world than having friends who love your babies. So that's it. But now I'd like to invite you all to take a moment to reflect on what's saving you right now.
In this next song, we're going to engage a responsive reading, a place where we will, the band will kind of read something over you. It's a kind of a poem by Sarah Bessey. And there's a response for you all. The response is the same line throughout. It says, "We are so loved." And so as we sing this song, as you listen, may this be a reminder that you are loved.
You don't have to be productive, and you don't have to change the world. You're already so loved.
We are so loved.
You don't have to conform to someone else's ideas of holy or acceptable. You can be from the wrong side of the tracks or the gated community, suburbs or urban or rural. You can work with your hands and your mind, your back and your brain. You don't have to be conservative or liberal. Your family story can be beautiful or terrible, or like most of us, a bit of both. None of that moves the meter of your belovedness.
You're so loved. Bring every doubt and fear. Bring all the shame you hide. 'Cause I have been waiting, longing to take it and break every lie. Even the darkest night, even when hope seems gone, no matter the distance, you need to know this. I won't let you go. Come as you are to me. You're never too far. You're never too far away. Come as you are.
You can doubt or feel great certainty, even if that certainty is in your doubt. You can believe in God, doubt God, seek God. You can be someone well acquainted with unanswered prayers. You can carry chronic pain or dance through life. You can be introverted or extroverted. You don't have to love yourself or even like yourself. You are loved.
We are so loved.
You can find rest in me. You can find hope and peace. It's something to cling to. Daily it meets you, and it starts here today. Come as you are. Come as you are to me. Never too far. You're never too far.
You have nothing to prove. You have nothing to earn. You may know already where God wants to breathe change and wholeness into, bringing your life more into line with the person you were meant to be all along.
We are so loved.
Love can and does and will transform us in every way. Our ideology, our opinions, our habits, our values, our priorities, our very names. But it's not a prerequisite of a requirement. It's not behavior modification. It never is. Not for love.
We are so loved.
New mercies awaken the heart, awaken the spirit, awaken the soul from death. New mercies awaken the heart, awaken the spirit, awaken the soul from death. So come as you are, come as you are to me. You're never too far, you're never too far away. Come as you are, come as you are to me. You're never too far, you're never too far away. Love has happened, and it is happening, and it will happen. It is kind and patient toward you. already so loved. You aren't earning a breath of love or tenderness more than what you already have just by breathing, just by existing, just by being here in the morning. Your name is already written in the lines of the hands of the universe. You're a star breath of dust, and you are beloved intimately, faithfully, wholly. You are known, you are loved with delight and abundance, with choice and desire, and with covenant or love.
You're so loved. You're so loved. You're so
New mercies awaken the heart, awaken the spirit, awaken the soul from death. New mercies awaken the heart, awaken the spirit, awaken the soul from death. So come as you are, come as you are to me. You're never too far, you're never too far away. So come as you are, come as you are to me. You're never too far, you're never too far away. Oh, new mercies awaken the heart, awaken the spirit, awaken the soul from death.
Well, good morning. My name is Matt. I'm one of the pastors here at Watershed, and this is the first Sunday of a new series we call Textuality, where we spend several weeks kind of delving into past ideas, past stories, past components of theology or doctrine, and we begin to try to translate those into our 21st century reality. And we did this series this time last year during the summer, and it really seemed to create a lot of traction for folks. I know part of what happens when you step into this community, whether it's been over the last several months or several years, is you're trying to take something that maybe has been dismantled or deconstructed, and then you're trying to reclaim that. You're trying to restructure that or recreate a new construction around that. And so this series kind of dials into that need that we hear often articulated from our community. And so there's something that I want to kind of hold space for in that regard as we move forward this morning. And the way I want to dive into it is by showing you this photograph. This is a picture of my son. He's 17. He's number 7 doing this. Last weekend, I wasn't here because we were in North Asheville at the Babe Ruth, the Western North Carolina Babe Ruth State Championship. And we had a rocking good time. It was 4 days of baseball, and Mez's team got out of the gate really strong. They went 4-0, only to be crushed by a 1-0 loss in the semifinals. But on Saturday afternoon, leading up to the semis, in an earlier game, something happened that sort of caught my eye. Right before the first pitch was thrown, the first baseman and the pitcher from the opposing team joined each other on the pitching mound. They took their hats off, and together they knelt and they prayed. And this went on for, 20 or 30 seconds and just sort of held the space there at the field. But as it was happening, some of their fans started to chirp, and they said things like, "That's right. This is the way we do it. This is who we are." And then you sort of heard this kind of applause that supported this thing that was happening. In my earlier adult life, I was a high school basketball coach and a math teacher in the state of Kentucky. And in my late 20s, I had sort of like this spiritual awakening. Some would have referred it to as a season where I rededicated my life to Jesus, which might sound familiar to some folks here. But as part of taking on that job, I had to assume the role of something called the club sponsor for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, FCA. And part of my role as the club sponsor was helping students organize different events, some of which were events where there were these public displays of prayer. We prayed around the flagpole. We prayed at prayer breakfasts. After games, there would be this concerted effort of Christians and anyone who's interested coming to the center of the floor or the field or whatnot and closing the game out with prayer. And I know there's quite a bit of political publicity around this sort of thing right now, especially in light of the recent Supreme Court ruling where that ruled in favor of a Washington State high school football coach who had been dismissed for organizing these sorts of moments. But this morning isn't a political conversation. I just want to assure you of that, although that's not out of the question here. And might actually serve us well in the future if the opportunity presents itself. But I'm starting here to underscore with this story the complicated relationship that I have with prayer at age 56, don't get ahead of myself here. Up until that season of spiritual awakening that I mentioned earlier, prayer really wasn't a part of my life. I kind of functioned in a vacuum of any sort of considerations around God. But once I started to really take a spiritual life more seriously, I had this friend who really started mentoring in this particular discipline. He invited me to pray regularly, like daily. And there was this one particular verse that he shared with me that really was sort of the hinge pin of me moving forward, and it's found in the book of Philippians, which was written by a guy named Paul, one of the sort of first century leaders of the church starting, where Paul writes, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God." And the Bible is loaded with stories and instructions and examples of prayer, isn't it? Like the book of Psalms itself is this massive production of the prayers or the lamentations of some of Israel's most notable leaders, attempting to communicate with the God of their understanding. The God of Israel is how it's portrayed in the scriptures. And then we know Jesus prayed frequently. In fact, his last words were a prayer. He taught his disciples to pray. In fact, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." The Lord's Prayer was a response to the question, "Jesus, how do you do this? How do you pray?" But after ignoring my spiritual life and sort of dismissing God for a lot of years, making your petitions known, man, this really took on some energy for me. Really struck a chord, like daily. You want to do it daily, but then all right, I forgot Tuesday, and then you deal with the shame and the guilt around that like a good Christian. But I filled up hundreds of pages of journals, like that now fill several boxes collecting dust in my attic. Prayer was empowering to me. I was told that I mattered to God and that God was interested not just in what I was experiencing, but what I felt, what I needed, what I wanted. And it's something that I still hold true today, but in a much different way that will become clear in just a moment. But we talk here occasionally about different views of God. But in that season, God was what could be described as a super being sort of God. In fact, a couple of weekends ago, if you were here and you heard some of the conversations between Thunklau Hoykip and myself, that phrase surfaced. Like this all-powerful being that's located outside of ourselves, somewhere else, so that when this God is beckoned, that God then interrupts our reality, our material world, our human experience to edit or to change something, to sort of be an advocate on our behalf. Bear with me today because there's several pictures, but this is a picture of one of our other children. This is our daughter, Jyoti. We actually have 3 internationally adopted children. Jyoti is adopted from India. Sullivan is adopted from Thailand. Jyoti's 22. Sully is 20. And then Mez, of course, that you saw earlier, is 17. He's from Ethiopia. But this picture to the left was taken the week that we went to get Jyoti in India. It's the first time we met her. And this is actually the first time we ever saw her smile. We happened to have a camera because she was not happy up until that point. The picture on the right is, I think, of her senior year. But one of the most important seasons for us, and specifically me, where prayer really mattered, or at least in my economy, happened during the months leading up to her adoption. When we decided we were going to begin building our family this way, the agency we were working with said it's going to take 12 to 14 months start to finish before you can actually fly and get the child that you're matched with. And so we had this timeline, this real defined timeline in our head, except on month 12, we were told that the court systems were lagging behind, in part because there was a judge that was ruling unfavorably towards couples from the United States or the West in general. And so cases were being dismissed right and left. It was creating a backlog of cases. And so 14 months turned into 15 and then 16. And the preparation our agency was giving us was, you might have to start all over. And you might not get this child. So you can only imagine how stressful this was for us. And we had pictures, we had video footage. The first time I ever saw my daughter cry was on a screen, and it wrecked me. But we had already bonded, like she didn't know us, but we fully had accepted her. And this was our daughter. This is who we're going to go get come hell or high water. And splattered all over the pages of these journals were some of the biggest emotions that I'd ever had in my life. Huge petitions. God, please do something here. God, please, get involved. Get rid of this judge. I mean, don't get rid of her, but you know what? Actually in the Bible, never mind, God. Listen, just can you please do something here? You can only imagine how emotive when the phone call came to say, you're good to go. How fast can you travel? I remember driving over to where Donna worked and saying, it's all gonna be fine. We're good. You can also imagine how confident and convinced and trusting we became in a God who would intervene. So that was 2001. Fast forward to 2013. We just completed our 3rd adoption. Mez had been home for a couple of years now. We got him in 2011. And while we were in Ethiopia to get Mez, we met this really dynamic young couple, and they were there to adopt their first child. It was a little girl from Ethiopia. And we got really connected to that family and a few others that were there doing the same thing, only to learn a couple of years later that they were actually going to get they're going to build their family through more adoption, this time, though, in Russia. And so part of the Russian adoption process was you have to go there and spend a month, and you connect to the child, you start working out the legal back inside of things. You bond with that child. You actually like live in proximity with that child in an apartment or a hotel room or whatnot. And then, and this makes no sense and it sounds torturous because it is, you have to leave Russia, come back to the United States, button some things up here, wait for things to evolve there, and then several months later you return, and that's when you bring the child home. And so that was the drill. And the family returned, and in about 3 or 4 weeks, as a way of politically punishing the United States for its foreign policy decisions, Vladimir Putin put a freeze on all U.S. adoptions. And for our friends, this was a devastating blow. They had already held this little girl. They had already communicated, bonded, laughed, played, cried, and immediately they sent out like the clarion call for everyone to pray, to make their petitions known, and they asked their friends to get involved. In fact, they were literally interviewed on CNN, on national television, because this was such a huge story. So this family, after trying everything imaginable, hiring attorneys in Russia, meeting with the State Department, petitioning the White House, petitioning God, thousands of people praying that somehow God would step into the middle of this. After months and months of this, it became clear that this was not going to happen. And the adoption never materialized. And to this day, they have no idea where this little girl is. They have no idea what the outcomes of her life have been. And the daughter that they promised to return to bring home never came home. 2 stories, similar circumstances, tons of petitions, 2 completely different outcomes. Which brings me back to my son's baseball game. And these 2 really precious, sweet boys kneeling and praying amidst applause and affirmation from their fans. And there was for me this inner conflict watching this unfold, knowing that there were and are seasons in my life where I not only affirm something like this, but I participate in it. Seasons where I still practice at some level, like I find myself whispering to the divine, please do something. But at 56 and at that moment, the only word that came to mind was complicated. John Shelby Sponge was one of the most prolific voices in liberal theology from 1955 to last year when he passed. He actually was born and grew up in Charlotte. I didn't know that till recently. But in 1977, he was one of the first American bishops to ordain a woman into the clergy. In 1989, he was the first priest to ordain an openly gay man. In both acts serving as these huge catalysts for the Episcopal Church to eventually accept and affirm the gay community in 1996, and then in 2015, actually recognized same-sex marriage. But Sponge, his wife succumbed to cancer later on in their marriage. Talks about this really complicated relationship he has with prayer, but in this quote, part of why it's complicated is the way that he understands God. He writes this: God is not a being to whom beings can relate. God is rather being itself. God is not a noun that needs to be defined. God is a verb that needs to be lived. And I wanted to focus on this or mention it at least because there's no denying that petition-oriented prayer is present within the pages of the Scriptures. That's undeniable. But there are other places in the Scriptures where it seems to be something else. It seems to transcend the petitionary way of showing up. For instance, Paul says, make your petitions known. But then later he also writes, pray without ceasing. In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. Quench not the Spirit. Petitionary prayer, praying with gratitude, that's really kind of straightforward, right? Like, in fact, that's how often we're either taught to pray or how we often move towards some sort of prayer, especially if you're the God that you're referring to is sort of this super being sort of God. But pray without ceasing? Seriously? Quench not the spirit. I mean, Paul, what the heck are you talking about here? I mean, how is that even achievable? But here's where I think Sponge's idea about God as being itself, God as a verb that needs to be lived, begins to open up all sorts of interesting possibilities. Possibilities that transcend a vending machine God of sorts and begin including an experience with God that is beyond our words, but still rooted in a material world where we live. Possibilities that include God as some force or energy that animates life, that flows from one human being to another. God as the very source, the essence of all things, the force that holds all things together, which was perfectly in line with other ideas that Paul would conceive of in terms of God as well. And hence, when you hear Paul say, so pray without ceasing and quench not the spirit, if your only category is super being God, this seems impossible. And it is, because you got to sleep, right? You got to watch Netflix. You know, how you supposed to hold those things together? But if God is some sense of divine nature, energy flowing, then what we're talking about here is the way that love connects us to us, connects us to each other, and connects us really to everything. We're talking about how everything is bounded, how life is bound together, how we're far more interdependent than we are independent, and we just may not realize it. So prayer then of this nature, without ceasing, without quenching the spirit, I think has less to do with petitions rather, and way more to do with being present. Way more to do with a way of life. Way more to do with environments that we create or occupy or foster. More awareness or consciousness around what's already true, whether we can see it or not. What's already happening, what's already going on in our body or in our bodies of the people in the world around us, or in the body known as the world at large, which still might feel complicated, but I would argue you're choosing the wrong word. It's not complicated, it's just really mysterious. It's just so beyond us. It's mysterious that you and I are both part of something, and something is a part of us, and that this something, at least according to Sponge and according to, I would argue, Paul, in our Christian tradition, could be called God, Christ consciousness, the universal Christ. Like, we're grasping for the words when words are just not enough. So here's a question that's been helpful for me that I'd like to share, and that question is, what sort of environments or behaviors could you involve yourself in where this sort of reality or mystery can be cultivated? That's an important idea, right? Because it's always ongoing. What experiences with yourself, others, in the world could you embrace that embody more connection, more awareness around this idea of us sharing a bounded life and interdependence? This too, if God is really love, which is a biblical idea, just for the record, if God were to be a verb, then the action of love, that would be divine. Right? The way we love through our actions becomes a way of praying then, doesn't it? The way we practice humility or courage, authenticity, transparency, the way we believe the best about ourselves and others, the way we practice kindness, and the way we stay curious instead of judgmental of others, specifically curious about those who are not like us. who sit at the margins of what we would say are normal, or who irritate us. Those hard to love people, which you can find most easily when you look in the mirror. Oh, you didn't think that was funny, huh? The way we apologize, reconcile, make amends, forgive, the way we speak and hear truth, the way we empathize. Suddenly, pray without ceasing takes on a whole other meaning. Quench not the spirit. Man, there's like both a responsibility and an invitation to live in a way that's completely different. It takes on a whole different meaning. It makes more sense as God becomes less of a magic 8-ball kind of God and more about a God that is in the shared life that we experience. Another way of asking this might be, if you were to audit the patterns, behaviors, or attitudes of your life, would those behaviors or attitudes be a reflection of prayer? Would they quench not the Spirit? Or would they unleash the Spirit into your life and into the world? Prayer that offers petition, prayer that never ceases, that quenches not the Spirit. And then finally this, in the Hebrew Scriptures, the psalmist cries out to God, "Give ear to my words, O Lord. Consider my groaning." And then later on, Paul, who was also Jewish, writes in Romans, "Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know what to pray for as we ought, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. And he who searches hearts knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God." Sometimes I groan, and I don't realize I'm groaning. Like sometimes something is so painful, embarrassing, difficult that I've gone through, am going through, like it rises up out of my subconscious, and it's like shows up with this deep sigh or moan or groan. Maybe it's anger or shame or embarrassment or regret or grief. All I know is that it's spontaneous. It often happens without me realizing, and for some reason it happens in the shower. And I don't know why it happens in the shower, but sometimes it will happen in the shower, and from the other room, I'll literally hear Donna say, "Hey, are you all right?" And initially it was like, "Hey, are you all right? Do I need to call 911? Are you having a heart attack?" More lately, it's like, "Hey, are you all right? Are you having a heart attack? Do I need to call 911? She is so insensitive at this point after all of these months of me groaning in the shower, which is probably a horrible story to tell. Anyway, but when we're talking about prayer, beyond petitioning and the lived experience with ourselves, we're talking about what do we do with our pain? What do we do with our anxiety, our suffering? And according to Paul, we're talking about some sense of presence or stability or hope found in the midst of the groan. For we do not know what to pray, but the Spirit intercedes with groanings too deep for words. You see what he's saying here. In his experience, when he was at his lowest moment, when the despair or the struggle was too much, the words weren't enough, and all that could materialize was a groan or a moan or a cry. In his experience, it was unclear where Paul was ending and where God was beginning. There was way too much overlap for him to go, "Oh, that's me," or "That's God." And in his view, at that point, God was just as real as it ever had been. And to let that idea grow, to let that conclusion play out, to hold tension between the longing or the need to petition and what is often the response of silence that follows. Groaning as a prayer acknowledges you're gonna be all right, even when you're not gonna be all right. Groaning as prayer holds onto the hope and the faith that in our weakness, with every breath, with every groan, we are present to love. We are present to God. God is present to us, and we, us, me, and God are together. And according to the great theologian Ted Lasso, when we are together, it's a gift. Otherwise, why would they call it present? Prayer that offers petition, that never ceases, that quenches not the spirit. Prayer from the groan. By the way, I think this idea of groaning transcends, but let me back up. You probably noticed this oscillating in and out of who we are as a community. Like, I've just described 4 different ways of showing up to this, and literally on a Sunday morning, there's probably a sense that, wow, like this feels like kind of an ebb and flow. It's because we're still trying to figure it out. But these ideas, the groan, I think transcends or translates back and forth from individual to community. If you've been around here for a while, every time there's some sort of evolutionary shift, there is some sense of individual and collective groaning. It's like, oh, wow, this moving from what's always been into uncharted waters, that's been a part of our story. And there's a reason that I'm kind of mentioning the organizational aspect of this, because we're in one of those seasons as a church. In fact, Scott, why don't you come on up? Give Scott Hofer a big hand this morning. Oh, thank you. That was so smooth, wasn't it?
We're good at that, aren't we?
So we've, you and I have been in some really deep conversation over the last 2 months. And this idea of groaning, does that strike a chord?
Well, for decades,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think back on my life, I imagine this is true for you as well. You have these indelible moments that you look back on, maybe half a dozen of them, that were central to who you are now. They've informed where like your life has gone. I remember this very vivid memory of sitting in a restaurant in Michigan with a dear friend who's now my wife, Taryn, sitting across the table from me. We were really great friends in that season. And I remember it was cold in the space, and I offered her my sweatshirt. And for whatever reason in that moment, there was this, wait a minute, we went from friendship to, I think there's something here. I don't know why, something clicked for me in that. And I remember that vividly, and it's very clear for me. And 6 months later, we were married, so it worked, apparently. I remember my 2 sons coming into this world as I was in that room and next to my wife and watching that whole experience and taking it in. Man, I will never forget that. I remember 33 years ago, in a very specific space and time and place for me, I was in school, and this sort of, in the church space, we had this sort of word we use calling, right? And I was called into this place of ministry. And the idea of ministry is kind of a broad narrative, but it was work that somehow you got paid to do, sort of nonprofit or church work, however you would sort of canonize that. And 33 years ago, we're leaning into that thing that this is what my life is going to be about. And then did that for quite a minute, got to know Matt and Donna and Taryn early in our 20s, and became really good friends, worked together. And I remember another wonderfully indelible moment, and I've got plenty of them, but this is another key one, where Matt and Donna and I and Taryn, we had lived in India. Many of you got to meet Tungla on the screen. He was our translator for months, and we got to know him for years, living over there for chunks of time, and had many meaningful experiences. And then we came home, and Taryn and I went to a church in Michigan. Matt and Donna went to a church in Florida, and we had spent all this meaningful time together, and like it kind of felt like it was over a little bit, but I remember Matt and Donna coming to Michigan and visiting with Taryn and I, and I remember the space in the house, I remember the moment. I remember the conversation. And Matt said, well, what would it look like to work together again? And we're like, well, yeah, that could be a lot of fun, but what do we know? Well, we really don't know anything. Like, what are we going to start that would
Not
allow
much has changed since
Yeah,
those
yeah,
days.
not much has changed. And we got into that, and we thought, well, we both work in a church, and we were naively enough in the day to think, well, maybe we could start one of these. And the people that were leading them, if they could do it, well, then maybe we could do it, right? And so we thought, well, let's go for it. And literally, I remember saying, well, what do we got to lose, right? Maybe somebody else will hire us if it doesn't work out. And so, and I was telling Matt earlier today, in that moment, you know, you have these times when you speak a narrative into reality, and you think, well, it's not going to happen. And then there are times you think about something, you discuss something, and you know, like, wait a minute, this is going to happen. And that was 20 years ago. It took us about 3 years to launch Watershed. We're 17 years old. And in that moment, and I remember telling Taryn afterwards, I think, our cushy, comfortable role in Michigan is over. We are moving. This is going to happen. We don't know where it's going to be. We don't know what it's going to look like. We had no idea you would be who you are today. But I remember in that indelible moment 20 years ago, knowing full well that this was going to happen. And for 17 years, we've been Watershed. We've been a co-leadership duo, and we've hopefully been successful in some spaces, and we've dropped the ball majorly, right? And I remember being one of the people that started this community, and thinking, well, clearly this community will benefit from my leadership and my spirituality and my experience. It has been absolutely the other way. I have gained so much more. And I think I speak for you in that way, Matt. I think I speak for our staff in that. I think there's this assumption, well, I'm going to show up and somehow serve it, and in the end, you get served back. And it has been an absolute amazing and wonderful ride. And about 12 years ago, Taryn and I started jumping into other lines of work, started some other businesses, some other things, and we've never really had a chance to dance and to play in those spaces, and we're leaning a little bit more into that these days. And I say all that to say the role that I've been playing as a co-pastor is transitioning to more of a part-time sort of operations person. So I'm still going to be here. I'm still going to be around. You're still stuck with me. You're going to still see me. This is still my community. This is my church. But I'm going to play a different role in that. And I'm excited about that, and I'm nervous, and I'm anxious. And I was telling Matt earlier, it's sort of like I'm Taryn's husband. I'm Colson and Keen's father. Like, those identities will never go away, and those are so meaningful to me. And I am also a part of Watershed, and that can't go away anytime soon. And I won't let it as long as you'll continue to have me. But I'm so grateful for what this community has been, and I think of like my wife and the role that you've played in this. Man, it's been so special, and it's been so difficult at times to sit in parallel and tandem and to be a part of what we get to do here. Donna, so grateful for you, and just the hours and weeks and years of just the stuff we've all had to go through and celebrate together. And brother,
Stop it.
I told him I wasn't going to cry because it was all gone. But I'm just so grateful for what we've had a chance to experience. I am absolutely confident in his leadership, and know he's going to kill it, and know he's going to do a great job. For a bunch of different reasons, you have a killer staff. You have some elders and lead team members that, man, they're in the weeds with you. And this is not your first rodeo. You've been around the block a minute, so I know you're going to kill it. But we just kind of wanted to. We're thinking about this idea of prayer and this idea of groaning, right? Like this has been something we've been talking about for a minute, and groaning into it. And just grateful that we get to do this together, and this is not a sad season. This is we talk about often like life and death here, when things sort of die and then resurrect, and something new is emerging here. Something new, beautiful, I think is very beautiful, is beginning to surface, and so just grateful for the season. Right?
How you doing?
All good, man. All good.
When Scott started verbalizing this a couple of months ago, it's like my brain and my heart were working double time to try to figure out, no, don't verbalize that. Put that back in the bottle. Put that back in the bottle. When we started this in 2005, the churches that sent us told us it was a bad idea. You shouldn't do this as a co-pastor leadership model. There's too many ways that can go south. And I guess at one level, the dirty little secret, that whole period leading up to it was, I was not going to do this alone. There's just no way. It was too risky. It was too scary. And there was only one person on the frickin' planet that I would even consider doing this with, and it was you. It was a relationship and a trust and a bondedness that was forged in experiences that transcend anything I'd ever gone through, that found us working in hostile environments and locking arms and getting through that, all the way to experiences on completely different continents. And this thing that we've had all this time moved from friendship to brotherhood. I don't have a brother, and I've told you this. I know you got brothers. I'm positive I'm a better brother than they are.
Sometimes, yes. Yeah.
But I think the thing that is going to remain true, and you and I have committed to this from day one, it's like, this has to work. It has to work because I love you, and I know you love me, but it also has to work because if it doesn't work, the implications of that are staggering for the people that say, hey, like, this is the community we want to be a part of, and nothing changes for us in that. I know we've talked about that. This is only a matter of more deepening and more intentionality moving forward, but I don't have words right now to say thank you. I don't even, it's not enough. The way that you've shown up, I'll start with this community, the way you and Taryn and your kids, Colson and Keen, and for years, the way that you've led out in front, and then also the way that you've led quietly that nobody knows about. The things that you're a part of, the goodness that you dispense, the kindness and this covert generosity and flow of relationship and support and stability in people's lives who right now, they know who I'm talking about in this space. And then finally for me, I'll never have a better friend in my life. I'm absolutely convinced of that. And I know if you're here for the first time, you're like, what in the world is this?
Yeah.
And if you can, thank you for giving us the space to do this morning. I am terrified at one level to move forward. When this started happening, it took about 3 weeks for both me and our lead team to go, like, what do I want, or what do we need to do? And the consensus with our staff and that group of leaders was the invitation for me to step into this as the lead moving forward. And so I'm doing that with fear and trepidation, but also with the confidence that you named, where, like, more than ever, we have, I think, staff, a leadership community, and then the people in this room to move this thing forward. And if there was ever a time to go, oh, wow, we really do get to do this together, now is that time. So I could keep going on. This is the longest Sunday morning I think we've ever had at Watershed.
He's going to kill us,
And any thoughts, comments, or snide remarks?
Again, no, I don't. And I'm an open book in this process. Again, I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with us. And I look forward to kind of leaning into some of the areas that I feel are strengths of mine and gifts of mine that I think will continue to come alongside and best serve at the pleasure of this community. My email is scott@watershedcharlotte.com. If you have any questions, you have any needs, whatever, still reach out to me, please. And I asked Matt earlier, could I close in prayer? I don't even know how to pray now because you messed it all up during that talk, but I'm going to still talk to something, all right?
You're welcome.
All right. Let me pray. Just maybe presence. So Spirit, essence, the Christ, just grateful for this way of being, this way of learning, this way of growing. And so I'm going to speak in a sense of just massive gratitude. I'm grateful for the staff. I'm grateful for this, our elders here, the folks in these chairs, the people that this is their first day, and they're like, man, this is crazy. But maybe you're gonna like step into this community, and I so implore you to consider that. I'm grateful for how this church shows up in people's lives. I'm grateful for the people that have marked me here, that sat patiently while we became an affirming community. Thank you so much to our LGBTQI community. Our community of color continues to grace and sit with us in this journey of discovering what it means to work on the anti-racism stuff that we continue to try to figure out and fumble into. And grateful for people who sit with the dissonance regarding theology and don't have to have it all buttoned up. And you're our people. And I look forward to this community continuing to grow, to ebb and flow, to something even, dare I say, bigger and better, whatever that even means, happening in the future. And I'm convinced of that. That for sure is going to happen. So Father, so being God, we deeply love you, and we thank you for these last 17 years we've had together. In Christ's name, amen.
Just stand as we close this morning by singing together.
You come at the right time when I least expect it, never behind. So why would I be surprised when you deliver every time?
God of my present, God of my future, you write my story, you hold it all together. God of my present, God of my future, you write my story, you hold it all together. God of my present, God of my future, you write my story, you hold it all together. God of my present, God of my future, you write my story, you hold it all together. Oh, and I believe that I will see
The goodness
the goodness of the Lord. I'm confident.
as seasons
Your
change.
faithfulness. God of my present, God of my future, you write my story, you hold it all together. God of my present, God of my future, you write my story, you hold it all together.
Thank you so much for being here with us this morning, for being a part of this story. Thank you. Have a great day. We'll see you next Sunday.
It's not just what you did, it's what you do. Not just how you move, it's how you move. It's not just what you gave, it's what you're giving. Not just after life, it's how you live. Even through us now. It's never too late, you're never too far gone.